Imagine a vast library, one that stretches endlessly in every direction. The bookshelves twist and fold into themselves, looping through time, through logic, through the very structure of reality. Every book in this library contains a paradox, an idea so strange that the moment you think you've grasped it, it slips away, leaving you in an endless spiral of thought. But tonight, you don't need to solve them. You only need to listen, to drift, to let your mind wander through this infinite maze where logic bends and contradictions unfold like a slow dream. Welcome to a journey through infinite loop paradoxes, ideas that wrap around themselves, refusing to be unraveled. These paradoxes are not just puzzles, they are doorways into the deepest mysteries of existence. They are whispers of logic teasing the edges of reason, questions that have haunted philosophers, mathematicians, and dreamers alike for centuries. As you settle in, let the weight of the day melt away. Each paradox will unfold like a slow, rhythmic tide, washing over you, drawing you deeper into a state of relaxation. You don't need to grasp every detail. Your mind can simply float along the currents of thought, carried by the ebb and flow of contradictions. Take a deep breath. Let your thoughts soften, and step into the infinite loops, where questions lead to answers that lead back to questions. A place where reason dreams, and where dreams perhaps are the purest form of reason. Now let's begin. The Liar Paradox, a statement that devours itself. There exists a sentence so simple yet so perplexing that the moment you hear it, you become ensnared in an endless loop of contradiction. The sentence is this: this statement is false. At first glance, it appears harmless, like a puzzle you could solve with a moment's thought. But the moment you try, it slips through your fingers. If the statement is true, then it must be false, because that is what it claims. But if it is false, then that means it must be true. And just like that, your mind is caught in an infinite loop, circling endlessly between truth and falsehood. There is no escape from this paradox. The moment you try to assign it a value, it twists back upon itself, negating whatever certainty you thought you had. It is a statement that devours itself, like a snake consuming its own tail, looping forever in an unbroken cycle. The Liar Paradox has haunted philosophers for centuries. The ancient Greeks pondered it, mathematicians wrestled with it, logicians tried to tame it with symbols and proofs, but the paradox remains, whispering its contradiction into the depths of reason. Some say it is simply a trick of language, an illusion born from words. Others argue that it reveals something deeper, something unsettling about the very nature of truth itself. If a simple sentence can exist in a state of perpetual contradiction, what does that say about the foundation of logic? Imagine for a moment that truth is like a delicate thread stretching across the vast chasm of understanding. The Liar Paradox is the knife that hovers just above that thread, poised to sever it at any moment. And yet, the thread does not break. It frays, it trembles, but it does not snap. In this way, the paradox does not destroy logic. It merely reveals its fragility. It reminds us that even the most fundamental concepts we take for granted, truth and falsehood, certainty and contradiction, are not as solid as they seem. Perhaps truth is not a single, unbreakable thing. Perhaps it is a shifting tide, a balance that exists not in absolute terms, but in relation to the contradictions that surround it. The Liar Paradox does not give us answers, but it forces us to question the ground we stand on. Now, let your mind drift with this thought. What if the entire universe were built on a paradox? What if, at the deepest level, existence itself was neither wholly true nor wholly false, but something in between, something forever oscillating between reality and illusion? Breathe in. Hold on to the contradiction. Breathe out. Let it go. The paradox does not need to be solved. It only needs to be experienced. Somewhere in the quiet, in the space between waking and sleep, between certainty and doubt, you can hear the whisper of the paradox, circling itself over and over again. A statement that is false, but if it is false, then it must be true. And if it is true, then it must be false. It is the echo of infinity, repeating endlessly into the void, a riddle without an answer, a loop without an exit. But you are safe here, floating within it, cradled by the paradox, held gently in the arms of contradiction. There is no need to resist, no need to search for resolution. Just let the paradox wrap around you like a warm current, like a lullaby sung by the universe itself. Drifting now, deeper deeper as the paradox continues to unfold, like a dream that folds into another dream, spiraling into infinity. And as you sink further into sleep, the liar paradox fades into the distance, dissolving into the quiet hum of thought, lingering just at the edge of understanding. And now we move on to another paradox, another loop, another endless stream of logic. Russell's paradox, the set that cannot contain itself. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine a vast, endless library, one filled not with books, but with collections. Shelves upon shelves, stretching into infinity, each containing groups of objects that share a common rule. Some collections hold books of a single color, some hold only numbers that are prime, some contain only words that have never been spoken. Now, among these countless collections, there is one particular set that stands apart. It is the set of all sets that do not contain themselves. And here, in this quiet space between logic and contradiction, a question arises. Does this set contain itself? If it does, then it should not, because it is only supposed to include sets that do not contain themselves. But if it does not, then it must, because it must include all sets that do not contain themselves. And just like that, the contradiction loops upon itself, spiraling endlessly in an unsolvable tangle of logic. This is Russell's paradox, a paradox so simple, yet so devastating, that it shook the very foundations of mathematics. It was discovered by the philosopher and mathematician Bertrand Russell in the early 20th century, a quiet riddle hiding at the heart of set theory, waiting to be uncovered. Mathematicians believed they could define reality using pure logic, that numbers and sets could be neatly categorized and structured into a flawless system. But Russell's paradox was a crack in that foundation, revealing an infinite loop that could not be escaped. Imagine, for a moment, a town with a single barber. This barber follows one simple rule: he shaves only those who do not shave themselves. But then, a question arises: who shaves the barber? If the barber shaves himself, then he cannot, because he only shaves those who do not shave themselves. But if he does not shave himself, then he must, because he shaves all those who do not shave themselves. And so the contradiction spirals, looping back and forth, an unresolvable knot in the fabric of logic itself. This is not just a problem of sets or of barbers. It is a question about the nature of reality itself. If logic is supposed to be the foundation of all thought, then what happens when logic contradicts itself? Breathe in and feel the contradiction settling around you like a fog, gentle yet inescapable. Breathe out and let the paradox drift through your thoughts, unresolvable yet strangely soothing. Russell's paradox tells us that not everything can be neatly categorized, that some ideas exist in a space where definition itself breaks down. It reminds us that infinity is not always clean, that some questions do not have answers, that some loops will never be closed. And yet the paradox does not demand resolution. It simply exists, like a quiet hum in the background of the universe, a whisper that logic is not always absolute, that truth itself may be more fluid than we think. Now, imagine the set once more, the set of all sets that do not contain themselves. It lingers at the edge of understanding, flickering between existence and impossibility, neither contained nor uncontained, forever trapped in an infinite loop. And as the paradox circles in your thoughts, you find yourself drifting, deeper, softer, letting go of the need to solve, embracing the quiet unraveling of logic. The contradiction fades, like a ripple dissolving into still waters, and you sink further into sleep, carried by the gentle tides of thought. And now we move on to another paradox, another loop, another dream of endless contradictions. The barber paradox, a loop of impossible rules. Close your eyes and picture a quiet village nestled between rolling green hills. The air is still, the streets are empty, and everything in this town follows a simple order. The rules are clear, the customs are unwavering, and within this structured world there exists a single, unspoken truth. Everything must make sense. In the center of this village, there is a barber shop, small but tidy, with a red and white striped pole slowly spinning by the door. It belongs to a single barber, the only barber in town. His task is simple but absolute. He shaves all those who do not shave themselves, and only those who do not shave themselves. At first, this rule seemed straightforward, a clear and logical way to keep the town in order. Every morning, men arrive at the shop, those who do not shave themselves taking a seat in the chair, and the barber, steady, precise, performs his task without question. But then, a single thought slips through the cracks, a quiet whisper that breaks the illusion of certainty. Who shaves the barber? If he shaves himself, then he must not, because he only shaves those who do not shave themselves. But if he does not shave himself, then he must, because he shaves all those who do not shave themselves. And just like that, the paradox loops, endlessly circling, neither true nor false, neither answer correct nor incorrect. The village, once so simple, is suddenly tangled in an impossible contradiction. The barber exists, yet he does not. The rule is clear, yet it cannot be followed. Reality bends upon itself like a mirror reflecting another mirror, an endless corridor of logic that stretches into infinity. You pause, breathing in. The paradox is unsettling, but at the same time strangely soothing. It is a puzzle without a solution, a question that has no answer, and in that, there is something calming. Because there is nothing to solve, nothing to figure out, there is only the loop, continuing forever. This paradox was first conceived by Bertrand Russell, a logician who sought to understand the very structure of thought itself. He realized that certain rules that seem unshakable, can sometimes collapse under their own weight. The barber paradox is not just a trick of words, it is a glimpse into the limitations of logic, a quiet warning that even the simplest systems can contain contradictions. Think of a rule, any rule, and ask yourself, can it be followed absolutely, without exception? Or is there always an edge, a place where the rule breaks down, where certainty gives way to uncertainty? Now imagine the village again. The barber shop stands where it always has, unchanged, eternal. The barber remains inside, waiting. He has always been there, always following the rule, and yet his existence defies the rule itself. Maybe the barber does not exist at all. Maybe he is just an idea, a whisper of logic unraveling at the seams. Or maybe the paradox is not about the barber, but about the nature of rules, about the way we try to impose order on a world that does not always conform to our expectations. And so the loop continues. If the barber shaves himself, he cannot. If he does not shave himself, he must. A contradiction locked in an endless cycle, an unsolvable riddle that stretches beyond the boundaries of reason. Let your mind drift with the paradox, floating through the infinite loop. There is no need to resist, no need to find an answer. The contradiction does not demand resolution, it simply exists, looping gently, like the rhythmic motion of waves, like the quiet ticking of a clock that has no end. Breathe in, let the question settle around you like a soft mist. Breathe out, let the paradox fade into the silence of the night. And just like that, the barber vanishes. Not because he was solved, but because he was never truly there to begin with. And now we move on to another paradox, another loop, another infinite dream of contradiction. The paradox of the unexpected hanging, a loop of inevitable surprise. Close your eyes and picture a prisoner, locked away in a small, dimly lit cell. The walls are rough and cold, the air heavy with silence. He has been here for months, perhaps years, waiting, always waiting. But today something changes. The warden arrives, his footsteps echoing down the stone corridor. He stands before the prisoner's cell, his expression unreadable, and speaks in a slow, deliberate voice. "You will be hanged at noon on one weekday of the coming week," the warden says. His tone is calm, almost indifferent. But the exact day will be a surprise. You will not know when it happens until the executioner arrives at your cell. Then, without another word, he turns and leaves, his boots clicking against the cold floor until they fade into silence. The prisoner is left alone with his thoughts. At first there is panic. His breath quickens, his heart pounds. But soon, reason takes over. He sits down on his cot, pressing his hands together, thinking, calculating. The warden's words seem to create a contradiction. If he is to be hanged, it must be unexpected. But if it is unexpected, then it cannot happen at all. The prisoner begins to unravel the logic, step by step. If the execution is to be a surprise, then it cannot take place on Friday. Because if he is still alive by Thursday night, then there will be only one day left. And if only one day remains, the hanging would no longer be unexpected. He would go to sleep knowing that he must die the next day, breaking the warden's condition. So Friday is impossible. But if Friday is ruled out, then Thursday must also be impossible. Because if he is still alive on Wednesday night, and he already knows the execution will not happen on Friday, then the only remaining day would be Thursday. again removing the element of surprise. By the same reasoning, Wednesday must be impossible too, then Tuesday, then Monday. One by one, the days collapse, each unable to hold the surprise. A slow smile spreads across the prisoner's face. The execution cannot happen. The warden's words contradict themselves. He has beaten the paradox. The week begins. Monday passes, then Tuesday. The prisoner is calm, even as Wednesday arrives. He eats his meager meal with a quiet confidence. He is a man of reason, and reason tells him that the hanging is impossible. Then, as the clock strikes noon, the guards arrive. The iron door creaks open. The prisoner looks up in shock. The executioner stands before him, silent, waiting. His heart pounds. His breath catches in his throat. The paradox has closed its loop. The hanging is unexpected after all. Breathe in. Feel the weight of the contradiction settle around you. Breathe out. Let go of the need to resolve it. This is the paradox of the unexpected hanging, a riddle that twists the very nature of logic, of prediction, of certainty itself. The prisoner thought he had solved the puzzle, that he had outwitted fate. But fate had already been set in motion. Perhaps the paradox reveals something deeper, something about time, about inevitability, about the way surprises do not vanish just because we try to predict them. Now, imagine yourself in the prisoner's place. Each night, you reassure yourself that tomorrow is safe. Each day, the possibilities narrow until all logic points to an impossibility. And yet, the moment arrives all the same. A deep truth lingers in the silence of the prison. The paradox does not break. It simply loops, folding over itself, revealing its answer only when it is too late to change. It whispers that certainty is an illusion, that sometimes the most expected outcome is the one we never see coming. Now let the scene fade. The prison walls dissolve. The warden's voice becomes a distant echo. The paradox lingers for a moment, circling in your thoughts before slipping into the stillness of sleep. And now we move on to another paradox, another loop, another infinite dream of contradiction. The Bootstrap Paradox, a story without a beginning, a cause without an origin. Imagine a library, a vast, endless expanse of bookshelves stretching far beyond sight. The air is thick with the scent of old parchment, the whispers of stories long forgotten. Somewhere, hidden in the quiet corridors of this infinite archive, sits a single book unlike any other. It has no author. No one ever wrote it. And yet the book exists, filled with knowledge, ideas, discoveries, passed down through time, copied, studied, preserved. But where did it come from? Who was the first to write its words? The answer is simple. No one. The book is caught in a loop, ever cycling between past and future, never truly beginning, never truly ending. This is the Bootstrap Paradox, a strange and unsettling puzzle of time travel, where cause and effect twist into a circle, erasing the very concept of a first moment. Let's tell the story another way. The Scientist and the Impossible Book. Imagine a scientist, brilliant, determined, obsessed with the mysteries of time. Night after night, he works in his dimly lit laboratory, surrounded by equations scrawled across walls, machines humming softly in the background. He is searching for something, the secret to time travel, the key to bending reality itself. And then, one evening, something miraculous happens. A package appears on his desk. He has no idea how it got there. The envelope is old, yellowed at the edges. Inside, he finds a book, the complete guide to time travel. His hands tremble as he flips through its pages. Inside, every theory, every calculation, every answer he had been searching for is already written. It is as if the book has come from the future itself, containing knowledge that should not yet exist. For years, the scientist dedicates himself to understanding the book. He deciphers its formulas, perfects its blueprints, and then one day he succeeds. He builds the machine, he steps inside, and vanishes. He travels back in time, emerging decades earlier. He is now an old man watching from the shadows as his younger self struggles over his work, drowning in unanswered questions. And in that moment, he realizes what must be done. He places the book on the desk, then he disappears, and the cycle begins again. The mystery of origin. The book has no origin. It was never created, never written by anyone's hand, and yet it exists, locked within an infinite loop, passed from future to past to future, forever. Where did it come from? Who wrote it first? Breathe in. The loop tightens, breathe out. The mystery deepens. The Bootstrap Paradox is more than a riddle. It is a whisper of something far greater, something unsettling about the very nature of time. It suggests that some things might not need a beginning at all. That knowledge, objects, even people might exist in a loop, untethered from creation. Think of a melody, a song passed down through generations. A traveler from the future hears it, then goes back in time and teaches it to the world. Where did the song begin? Or imagine an invention, a machine that revolutionizes the world. A young engineer from the future brings back its blueprints, sharing it with the past. The past then builds it, refines it, passes it forward in time, where the same engineer rediscovers it. Who invented it? Where does the loop start? The loop of existence. Perhaps time itself is a spiral, a pattern that repeats, folding over itself in ways we cannot yet understand. Perhaps in some distant reality, a book sits on a desk waiting to be found. A melody drifts through time, waiting to be heard. A machine hums softly, waiting to be built. No beginning, no end, only the loop. And now, let the paradox fade. Let the ticking of the clock dissolve into silence. There is no need to solve it, only to drift deeper, to let the mystery carry you gently towards sleep. And now we move on to another paradox, another loop, another infinite dream of contradiction. The paradox of the ravens, a shadow of infinite contradiction. Imagine a quiet forest at dusk. The air is cool, the sky painted in fading hues of orange and violet. The trees stand tall and motionless, their branches whispering softly in the evening breeze. And there, perched upon the highest branch, is a raven. Its black feathers absorb the dying light, swallowing color into an endless abyss. It watches you with deep, knowing eyes, as if it holds a secret you were never meant to understand. This is the paradox of the ravens, also known as Hempel's paradox. A strange puzzle of logic that challenges our very understanding of evidence, of truth, of what it means to know something for certain. The logic of the paradox. In the world of logic, a simple statement can reveal strange contradictions. Consider this claim. All ravens are black. It seems reasonable, doesn't it? We've only ever seen black ravens. No red ones, no blue ones. Every raven we've ever encountered has been cloaked in darkness. So how do we confirm that this statement is true? It seems obvious. We observe more ravens. Every time we see a black raven, our belief grows stronger. The evidence piles up, reinforcing what we already suspect. But now, let's twist the logic. The statement, all ravens are black, is logically equivalent to another statement, everything that is not black is not a raven. A white swan, a green leaf, a golden coin. None of these things are black, and none of them are ravens. So by this strange twist of reasoning, every time we see a white shoe or a red apple, we are, somehow, gathering evidence that all ravens are black. The paradox deepens. The infinite absurdity. Picture yourself standing in a small, dimly lit study. Bookshelves line the walls, filled with ancient tomes. A candle flickers on the desk, casting long shadows across the wooden floor. In front of you, a notebook lies open, filled with observations. You write, "I have seen a black raven." Then you write again, "I have seen a white sock." And somehow, both are considered equal evidence for the statement, all ravens are black. It feels absurd, doesn't it? And yet the logic is airtight. If we accept that a rule applies universally, then anything that does not contradict the rule must, in a strange way, support it. Breathe in, the contradiction tightens. Breathe out, the logic loops. What does this mean? Does this suggest that knowledge is more fragile than we think? That truth is not built solely on direct observation, but on the absence of contradiction. Imagine a scientist in a vast laboratory, surrounded by endless specimens. He searches for a white raven, a single contradiction that would shatter the rule. But in the process, he documents thousands of things that are not ravens: books, pencils, oceans, stars, and each one, somehow, adds to the evidence. Does this mean the universe is always proving its own truths, even in the smallest, most unrelated things? The shadow of truth. The raven watches you from its high perch. It does not speak. It does not move. It simply exists, black, silent, eternal. Perhaps the paradox whispers something deeper, something unsettling about the way we search for meaning. Perhaps truth is not a straight path, but a maze, winding endlessly upon itself. Perhaps reality does not reveal itself in obvious ways, but instead hides within contradictions, slipping between what is seen and what is not. Now, let the raven fade. Let the candle's flame flicker into darkness. The logic does not need to be solved. It only needs to be felt, like a dream that lingers just beyond reach. And now we move on to another paradox, another loop, another infinite dream of contradiction. The Sorites Paradox, the vanishing line between something and nothing. A desert stretches endlessly beneath a soft golden sky. The sand is warm, shifting gently in the wind. In the middle of this vast emptiness sits a small mound, a heap of sand, piled loosely, waiting. It is unmistakably a heap. Now picture a single grain of sand being removed. The change is imperceptible. A single grain is nothing compared to the whole. The heap remains a heap. Then another grain is taken away. Still, nothing changes. Another. Each removal is insignificant, too small to matter. And yet, if this process continues, slowly, steadily, grain by grain, something strange happens. Eventually, the heap disappears. But at no point was there a clear moment when the transformation occurred. There was never a single grain that once removed turned the heap into not a heap. The transition was gradual, so subtle that no single step seemed important. And yet, at the end, nothing remained. This is the Sorites Paradox, also known as the Paradox of the Heap, a strange puzzle of vagueness that challenges the very idea of boundaries, of definitions, of when something becomes or ceases to be what it is. The fragility of definitions. A single grain of sand is not a heap. 2 grains are not a heap. Even a small pile may not qualify, but at some point, as more grains are added, it becomes one. Yet, there is no single number of grains that marks the transformation. Is it 10, 100, 1,000? If there is no precise threshold, then what does it mean to call something a heap at all? The paradox extends far beyond sand. It applies to everything in life, everything built on gradual change. When does a child become an adult? There is no single moment, no breath, no birthday, when youth fades and adulthood begins. The transformation is slow, unnoticeable, and yet one day the child is gone, replaced by someone older, someone changed. When does a person go from having hair to being bald? There is no single strand that, once lost, marks the threshold. The difference is undeniable when seen from a distance. One person with a full head of hair, another completely bald, but the transition itself is impossible to pinpoint. When does night turn into day? There is no single second when darkness ceases and light begins. The sky shifts in tiny increments, the stars fade, the horizon glows, but there is no precise moment that separates one from the other. When does a pile of leaves become a forest? When does water become ice? When does sound become noise? The paradox forces an unsettling question. If no single step creates the change, then does the change ever truly happen at all? The slow disappearance of certainty. The grains of sand slip away, one by one. The heap dissolves, and yet the paradox remains. Perhaps definitions are fragile, built not on absolute truths but on convenience. Perhaps the world does not operate in clear-cut categories, but in shifting gradients, where all things blur into one another. A ship sails across the ocean, enduring the elements. Over time, its wooden planks decay, and one by one, they are replaced. Every piece is eventually changed, yet it is still called the same ship. But if not a single original plank remains, is it still the same vessel? A person grows, learns, forgets, and changes. Their thoughts shift, their body regenerates, their memories reshape. They are not who they once were. But at what point did they become someone new? What is identity if it is constantly being rewritten? The paradox seeps into language itself. Words try to pin down reality, to divide the world into neat categories, but reality resists. Labels, definitions, names, they are all attempts to carve solid lines into something that refuses to hold still. The vanishing point. The desert stretches out, golden and endless. The heap is gone, but was it ever truly there? Or was it only an illusion, a temporary arrangement of grains that we gave meaning to, until meaning faded away? Perhaps the Sorites Paradox is not just a puzzle. It is a reflection of how everything changes. It is a quiet reminder that nothing is fixed, that everything is shifting, flowing, dissolving. That identity, like sand, is something we try to hold in our hands, only to watch it slip through our fingers. And just like that, another paradox unfolds, another endless loop of contradiction. Self-referential statements, the words that loop forever. A single sentence stands alone on a blank page. It reads, "This statement is false." It seems simple at first, but then a contradiction emerges. If the statement is true, then it must be false, because that is what it says. But if it is false, then it must be true, because a false statement means the opposite of what it claims. truth and falsehood collapse into each other, trapped in an infinite loop. This is the strange and paradoxical nature of self-referential statements, sentences that refer to themselves in a way that defies resolution. They are not just words on a page. They are logical mazes, endless spirals where meaning dissolves and certainty becomes an illusion. The infinite loop of logic. Self-referential statements are a peculiar kind of thought trap. They do not follow the normal rules of language and truth. Instead, they fold back on themselves, like a mirror reflecting another mirror, creating an image that stretches into infinity. Consider this statement: I always lie. If it is true, then the speaker must always lie, but that would mean the statement itself is a lie, making it false. But if it is false, then the speaker does not always lie, which means the statement could be true. The logic collapses into an endless contradiction. Or take this sentence: this sentence does not exist. But there it is, written in front of you. If it does not exist, then how can it be read? If it does exist, then it contradicts itself. The mind tries to hold on to meaning, but meaning slips away. The strange nature of self-reference language is built on the idea that words point to something beyond themselves. A name represents a person, a sentence describes a fact, a question seeks an answer. But what happens when words turn inward, when they refer only to themselves? Imagine a book that contains only one sentence. Everything in this book is false. If the statement is true, then everything in the book, including the statement itself, must be false. But if it is false, then at least some part of the book must be true, which means the statement is both true and false at the same time. The paradox does not resolve, it only loops, endlessly. The ghost in the machine. Self-referential paradoxes are not just linguistic curiosities, they reveal something deeper about the nature of logic, mathematics, and even consciousness. In the world of computing, self-reference leads to strange and unexpected problems. Consider a simple instruction given to a machine. Do not follow this instruction. A computer, bound by logic, encounters a contradiction. If it follows the instruction, it must not follow it. But if it does not follow it, then it must follow it. The system breaks down, caught in an infinite loop. The famous halting problem posed by Alan Turing explores this idea on a grander scale. It asks, can a program be written that determines whether any given program will eventually stop running or loop forever? Turing proved that such a program is impossible. There are certain kinds of problems, certain self-referential loops, that cannot be solved by computation, no matter how powerful. The mirror of consciousness. Self-referential paradoxes do not only exist in language and mathematics, they also exist in the mind. Consider this thought: can I ever fully understand myself? The mind is both the tool of understanding and the object being understood. But can something fully grasp itself without stepping outside of itself? Can a camera photograph itself without a mirror? Can a book read its own pages? Human consciousness is like a hall of mirrors, reflecting thoughts upon thoughts, ideas upon ideas. We think about thinking, we question our own questions, we loop endlessly in search of meaning. But meaning, like the self-referential statement, remains elusive. The paradox that never ends. A single sentence stands alone on a blank page. It reads, "This statement is false." It waits for resolution, but resolution never comes. It asks a question that cannot be answered, a puzzle with no final piece. It loops forever. And so, another paradox unfolds, another endless spiral of contradiction. The paradox of material implication, when logic defies intuition. A candle flickers in the quiet darkness, a storm rumbles in the distance, and somewhere deep within the world of logic, a paradox quietly unfolds, one that challenges the very nature of truth itself. Consider this statement: if the moon is made of cheese, then 2 + 2 = 5. At first glance, it seems absurd. The moon is not made of cheese, and 2 + 2 certainly does not equal 5. The connection between the two ideas appears nonsensical, a meaningless jumble of words. And yet, in classical logic, this statement is considered true. Not because the moon is actually made of cheese, not because 2 + 2 suddenly equals 5, but because of something far stranger, something known as material implication. A rule that feels wrong. In formal logic, an implication takes the form, if P, then Q, where P is the premise, the condition, and Q is the conclusion, the result. For example, if it is raining, then the ground is wet. If you eat too much, you will feel full. In everyday reasoning, these statements make sense. The truth of peace leads naturally to the truth of Q, but logic, stripped of intuition, follows a different set of rules. According to the principles of material implication, an implication is always true when the premise P is false, regardless of whether the conclusion Q makes sense or not. This means the statement, if the moon is made of cheese, then 2 + 2 = 5 is logically true, because the premise is false. The bizarre claim about arithmetic is irrelevant. In the world of logic, a false premise allows any conclusion to follow. This feels unnatural. It contradicts intuition. But logic, in its cold precision, does not operate on feeling, it operates on structure. The strange consequences of material implication. The paradox deepens when we explore its implications. Consider another statement. If pigs can fly, then I am the king of the universe. Logic tells us this statement is true simply because pigs cannot fly. The truth or falsehood of the second part does not matter, only the premise determines the result. Or take this, if 1 + 1 = 3, then I can breathe underwater. It sounds absurd, but since 1 + 1 does not equal 3, logic dictates that the entire statement must be true. This rule allows for statements that seem meaningless, yet are considered logically valid. It creates a world where falsehood births truth, where nonsense is woven into reason, where anything can be true as long as it follows the rules of implication. The broken bridge between cause and effect. Part of the discomfort with material implication comes from how we naturally understand cause and effect. In everyday life, we expect connections to be meaningful. If someone says, if I drop this glass, it will shatter, we assume a real-world relationship between the action and the consequence. But in pure logic, implication does not imply causation. The connection between premise and conclusion is structural, not causal. Logic does not care if the two ideas are related. It only cares about the pattern of truth values. This is why, in classical logic, the statement, if I drop this glass, the sun will explode, can be true, even though the two events have no connection at all. The uncomfortable reality of logical truth. Material implication forces a difficult realization. Truth, in logic, is not always what we expect it to be. In daily life, we see truth as something meaningful, something grounded in reality. But in formal logic, truth is simply a matter of structure. It is a mechanical system where statements follow rules that sometimes lead to bizarre conclusions. This paradox highlights the tension between logic and intuition. We trust logic to give us clear answers, to reveal truth in its purest form. But sometimes logic presents us with conclusions that feel alien, unsettling, truths that do not seem like truths at all. The infinite puzzle of meaning. A candle flickers, the storm rumbles. Somewhere, a sentence waits in the quiet. If the impossible is true, then anything can follow. Material implication is a doorway into deeper paradoxes, questions about reasoning, meaning, and the limits of understanding. Perhaps the paradox is not just about logic. Perhaps it is about the human need for meaning, for connection, for truths that feel solid beneath our feet. But in the world of pure logic, there is no meaning, only patterns, only rules, only the cold mechanics of implication. And so, another paradox unfolds, another endless loop of contradiction. Circular reasoning, the loop that never ends, a single step forward, a quiet pause, and then another step, right back where you started. A circle is not a journey, not a path that leads somewhere new. It is a loop, endlessly feeding into itself. And within the realm of logic, there exists a kind of argument that does exactly this. It begins where it ends where it begins. This is circular reasoning, also known as petitio principii, a paradox of logic where the conclusion is hidden within the premise, creating an argument that turns forever in on itself. The trap of circular arguments. Consider this statement. The Bible is true because it is the Word of God, and we know it is the Word of God because the Bible says so. At first glance, it seems like an argument, a chain of reasoning. But when examined closely, it reveals a flaw. It relies on itself for proof. The Bible is true because it is the Word of God. We know it is the Word of God because the Bible says so. But how do we know the Bible is reliable? Because the Bible itself tells us so. The argument simply loops, resting on itself rather than external evidence. This is the defining characteristic of circular reasoning. Rather than proving something, it assumes what it sets out to prove. It presents an illusion of logic, but no real explanation. The illusion of justification. Circular arguments appear everywhere, often hidden beneath layers of complexity. They are seductive because they offer a feeling of certainty, a self-contained answer that reassures rather than questions. Consider these examples. I am the best leader because no one leads as well as I do. This medication works because people take it to feel better. This law is just because it follows the principles of justice. Each statement creates a loop where the conclusion simply restates the premise in different words. They sound persuasive, but they prove nothing. The infinite spiral of assumptions. At the heart of circular reasoning lies an unspoken assumption that truth can exist within itself, independent of external verification. Imagine a book that claims everything in this book is true. But how do we know this? Because the book says so. Or a person who declares, I am always right, and if you disagree, you are wrong. How do we test this claim? If questioning it is considered wrong, then no challenge can ever succeed. The argument protects itself by rejecting any outside perspective. This is why circular reasoning is so dangerous. It closes itself off, allowing no escape. It creates a paradox where truth is assumed, not discovered. The circularity of belief beyond logic. Circular reasoning seeps into human belief systems, reinforcing ideas not because they are true, but because they support themselves. Consider how ideologies sustain themselves. This political system is the best because it produces the best results. Our religion is correct because our holy texts say so. This scientific theory must be true because most scientists believe it. Each claim rests on itself, drawing strength from its own foundations. But true understanding requires something more, a willingness to step outside the circle, to challenge assumptions rather than accept them blindly. The never-ending circle. A path stretches before you, a step forward, and then another. But somehow, despite all movement, you find yourself right back where you started. Circular reasoning is not just a flaw in logic. It is a reflection of how the mind seeks comfort in certainty, how belief often resists doubt, how we sometimes mistake repetition for truth. But truth is not found in endless loops. It is found in the places where we dare to question, to step beyond the familiar, to break free from the illusion of self-contained certainty. And so, another paradox unfolds, another endless spiral of contradiction. Catch-22, the trap with no escape. A soldier stands in an office holding a request for discharge. His hands tremble. The war has drained him, left his mind frayed at the edges. He can't take it anymore. He wants out. He places the request on the officer's desk and waits. The officer barely looks up. Why do you want to leave? I'm not fit to fight. This war is madness. The officer nods. Ah, so you're worried about your own safety? Yes. Well, that's a perfectly rational response to a war. An irrational person is, by definition, sane. The officer stamps denied on the request. The soldier stares, confused. But I'm not fit to fight. The officer shrugs. Only a crazy man would willingly stay in a war like this. If you know it's dangerous, you must be sane. And only the insane can be discharged. The soldier realizes the truth. He's trapped in a loop, a contradiction built into the very system. This is Catch-22, a paradox with no way out. A rule that traps you no matter what choice you make. The nature of a Catch-22. A Catch-22 is a situation where the conditions for escape contradict themselves. Any attempt to break free only reinforces the trap. The term comes from Joseph Heller's novel Catch-22, a dark satire about the absurdity of war and bureaucracy. In the book, pilots can request to be grounded if they are mentally unfit to fly, but the very act of making the request proves they are sane, because only a rational person would want to avoid flying dangerous missions. Thus, no one can ever leave. The rule defeats itself, creating a cycle that never ends. Examples of Catch-22 in everyday life. These paradoxes are not confined to fiction. They lurk everywhere, hiding within the structures of society, law, and logic. You need experience to get a job, but you need a job to get experience. To get a loan, you need good credit, but to build credit, you need a loan. Freedom of speech allows you to criticize authority, but criticizing authority makes you a target. You can't see the doctor without insurance, but you can't get insurance without a job, and you can't get a job without seeing a doctor first. Each of these situations creates a closed loop, a paradox that prevents progress. The paradox of bureaucracy. Bureaucracies are breeding grounds for catch-22s. Rules designed to maintain order often entangle themselves in contradictions. To file a complaint, you must go through the proper channels. But the channels are the reason for the complaint. You must pay a fee to challenge an unfair fine. You need a form to request another form. The system reinforces itself, trapping people in endless cycles of red tape. Logic breaks down, replaced by absurdity. Psychological catch-22s, the mind's traps. The human mind is not immune to these paradoxes. Sometimes our thoughts trap us just like bureaucratic rules do. To be confident, you must stop worrying. But to stop worrying, you need confidence. To be loved, you must be yourself. But to be accepted, you must change. To overcome anxiety, you need to relax. But anxiety prevents relaxation. The more we try to escape, the tighter the paradox holds us. The struggle itself becomes the reason we remain stuck. The catch-22 of existence. At a deeper level, life itself presents paradoxes that feel like catch-22s. You need purpose to be happy, but happiness makes purpose feel unnecessary. To find meaning, you must stop searching. But to stop searching, you must find meaning. To be truly free, you must accept limitations, but accepting limitations means giving up freedom. These paradoxes lie at the heart of human existence. They are unsolvable loops, mysteries that have no clear resolution. Escaping the loop. So how does one escape a catch-22? The answer is both simple and difficult. You don't play the game. The only way to break free from a paradox is to step outside of it. Instead of searching for experience, create your own. Instead of waiting for permission, act first. Instead of trying to win the system, find a different path. Not every paradox has a solution, but sometimes the illusion of a trap is just that, an illusion. The key is not to fight the contradiction, but to recognize it and move differently. The eternal loop. A soldier stands in an office, holding a request for discharge. The officer shakes his head. You know the rules. The soldier sighs. There is no escape. The system is built upon itself, a machine with no exit. The Cretan Liar Paradox, a truth wrapped in a lie. A man stands before a crowd. His voice is steady, his words deliberate. He looks upon the faces before him and speaks a simple sentence. All Cretans are liars. For a moment, the people are silent. Then the murmuring begins. Some nod in agreement, others furrow their brows. A few chuckle, sensing something strange hidden within the words. But the speaker is a Cretan himself. And there it is, the paradox. If what he says is true, then he, being a Cretan, must also be a liar. But if he is a liar, then his statement cannot be true. Yet if his statement is false, that means at least some Cretans must be honest, which contradicts the claim that all Cretans are liars. His words turn back on themselves, folding into an infinite loop where truth and falsehood collapse into one another. This is the Cretan Liar Paradox, also known as the Epimenides Paradox, one of the oldest and most perplexing paradoxes in history. The ancient roots of the Liar Paradox. The paradox is attributed to Epimenides, a philosopher, prophet, and poet from Crete who lived around the 6th century BCE. He wrote a poem in which he declared that Cretans are always liars, a statement that has puzzled thinkers for over 2 millennia. On the surface, it appears straightforward, just a claim about the nature of Cretans, but look deeper, and it becomes clear that the statement is self-referential. If it is true, then Epimenides himself, being a Cretan, must be a liar. If it is false, then at least some Cretans must tell the truth, contradicting the statement itself. This paradox is one of the earliest recorded examples of self-referential statements, sentences that turn back on themselves in a way that makes them impossible to classify as either true or false. The Liar's Web, variations of the paradox. The Liar Paradox appears in many forms, each one just as perplexing. 1. This statement is false. If it's true, then it must be false. If it's false, then it must be true. 2. I always lie. If the person always lies, then their statement must be a lie. But if it's a lie, then they must tell the truth sometimes. 3. A sign on a door reads, "Ignore this sign." If you obey it, you must ignore it. But ignoring it means you are reading it. Each version of the paradox reveals the same fundamental problem. Truth and falsehood become entangled in a way that logic cannot untangle. The logical nightmare. Can the paradox be solved? For centuries, philosophers and logicians have tried to resolve the Liar Paradox. Some have dismissed it as meaningless, while others have attempted to redefine truth and falsehood itself. One approach is to suggest that the statement is neither true nor false, that it exists outside the realm of binary logic. But this raises new questions. If some statements can be neither true nor false, how does that change our understanding of logic itself? If a paradoxical statement is meaningless, why does it still create contradictions in our reasoning? Mathematician Alfred Tarski attempted to address this paradox by suggesting that statements about truth must be separated from the language in which they are expressed. He introduced the idea of metalanguages, where a statement about truth must exist on a higher level than the language it describes. Yet, even this approach does not fully escape the paradox. Instead, it merely shifts it into a new form: the liar's paradox in everyday life. Beyond philosophy, the liar paradox appears in unexpected places, from politics to artificial intelligence. I am lying to you right now. If you believe it, then it must be false. If you don't, then it must be true. A politician says, "Nothing I say can be trusted." If true, then his statement itself cannot be trusted. If false, then at least some of what he says must be true. A company advertises, "We never lie in our marketing." If this claim is false, then they do lie. If it's true, then why would they need to say it? These paradoxes do not exist only in words, they exist in the structures of society itself. The liar's paradox in artificial intelligence. With the rise of AI and self-learning machines, the liar paradox has taken on new significance. Imagine programming a robot with a single rule: everything I tell you is false. What happens when it states, "I am telling the truth"? The machine enters an infinite loop, unable to resolve the contradiction. Some AI systems already struggle with similar logical inconsistencies. Chatbots and decision-making algorithms rely on structured logic, but when faced with paradoxes, they can become trapped in cycles of self-contradiction. The Infinite Regress Problem, a staircase with no end. The old man sat beneath the flickering glow of an oil lamp, his face weathered by time, his eyes heavy with wisdom. Across from him sat a young traveler, eager yet restless, searching for answers that always seemed just out of reach. "I need to know," the traveler said, leaning forward. "What is the ultimate truth? The final answer? The thing upon which all things rest?" The old man smiled, his fingers tracing the rim of his cup. "Ah," he said softly, "you are searching for the bottom of the staircase." The traveler frowned. "The what?" The old man leaned back and exhaled, his voice slow, steady, like waves upon the shore. "Imagine a staircase," he said. "You stand at the top, looking down. You take a step and another, but no matter how far you descend, the staircase never ends." The traveler nodded, listening. No final step, no bottom, just an infinite descent into the unknown. The traveler's brow furrowed. But there has to be an end, a foundation, a last step. The old man chuckled. "Does there?" And so, the conversation began. The search for the first cause. The traveler was troubled. If everything must come from something else, then what did the first thing come from? The old man nodded. A question as old as time. He reached for a small, smooth stone and set it on the table. "Imagine this is the first thing," he said. "The foundation of all things. Now tell me, what holds it up?" The traveler hesitated. "Something must." The old man placed another stone beneath it. "And what holds up that?" The traveler sighed. "Something beneath that, I suppose." The old man stacked another stone and another, until they wobbled, an unsteady tower of uncertainty. How far can we go before we realize there is no bottom, that every answer leads only to another question? The traveler stared at the stack of stones, feeling the weight of endless questions pressing down. The story of the great turtle. The old man smiled. "There is an old story," he said. "A philosopher once told a great theory of the universe, explaining that the earth rests upon a mighty foundation. He lifted his hand, holding the air as if cradling a world. But an old woman in the crowd shook her head and said, 'No, the earth rests upon the back of a great turtle.'" The traveler chuckled. "And what does the turtle stand on?" The old man's eyes gleamed. "Another turtle." "And that one?" "Another turtle," the traveler sighed. "Let me guess, it's turtles all the way down." The old man nodded. An endless descent, a staircase with no final step, 3 paths through the infinite. The traveler rubbed their temples. "Then what do we do? If every answer only leads to another question, how do we ever stop searching?" The old man folded his hands. There are 3 ways, he said. 1. Find a final step. Some people believe there is a final answer, a first cause, a last step that needs no explanation. The traveler's eyes lit up. Like the first moment of time? The first law of the universe? The old man nodded. Yes, but how do we know when we've truly found it? How do we know we're not just standing on another step with another beneath it, waiting to be discovered? The traveler fell silent. 2. Accept the circle. Others believe there is no first step, but rather a circle, the old man continued. The traveler frowned. A circle? Yes, the old man said. Instead of an endless staircase, imagine a wheel. Each answer supports the next, which supports the next, which loops back to the first. The traveler thought for a moment. But doesn't that mean we're just walking in circles? The old man chuckled. Perhaps, but some find comfort in the idea that the wheel turns forever, rather than searching for a bottomless pit. 3. Embrace the infinite. The old man leaned closer. His voice was softer now, as if whispering a secret. And then there are those who accept the infinite, he said. They do not search for a final step, nor a perfect circle. They simply walk, knowing the staircase never ends. The traveler swallowed. But isn't that terrifying? To never reach an answer? The old man smiled. Is it? He gestured to the sky. Look at the stars. Are they any less beautiful because they stretch on forever? Does the ocean lose its wonder because it has no end? The traveler looked up, feeling the vastness above, the gentle descent. The old man refilled his cup, the steam rising in slow, curling tendrils. We spend our lives searching for the final step, he said. But what if we were never meant to find it? The traveler exhaled. The weight of the question, once heavy, now felt lighter. The staircase would never end, but perhaps that was the beauty of it. A journey with no destination, a mystery that never stops unfolding. A descent into the infinite where every step is simply another step. The old man sat quietly, watching as the traveler's eyes grew heavy, their breathing slow, their mind drifting into the endless depths of thought and dream. And somewhere far away the staircase stretched on. And so, our journey comes to a close. Or perhaps it simply continues in a quieter way. The paradoxes we've explored tonight are not puzzles to be solved, nor riddles with answers waiting just beyond reach. They are doorways, openings into an endless expanse of thought, where questions give birth to more questions, where every step forward reveals another step ahead. Like waves that never cease upon the shore, like stars that stretch forever into the night. Like a staircase that leads only to another step. Maybe that's the beauty of it all. Maybe we were never meant to reach a final answer, but instead to drift. Gently, endlessly, carried by the wonder of the unknown. Feel the weight of each thought slowly fading, dissolving like mist in the morning sun. The paradoxes remain, but their edges have softened. No need to hold on to them. No need to grasp for an ending. Just let them float. Let them fade, like distant echoes on the wind. And as your mind drifts, as your thoughts slow, as the questions become whispers in the background, know that the journey is still there, waiting for you whenever you wish to return. But for now, rest, let go, and sink into the quiet embrace of sleep. The staircase stretches on, but there is no need to climb, not tonight.